Jorge Masvidal is officially the man with the fastest KO in UFC history. Street Jesus, the creator of the 3-piece and a soda combo meal. Many fans have been watching his career for a long while, but some are just now catching on to the magic that is Gamebred. For SBN MMA, I'm Shaquille Majuri, and let's take a deep dive into the history of Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal's first introduction to longtime fans came via Kimbo Slice's backyard fighting events on YouTube. Men would gather to brawl bare knuckle on Florida lawns and parking garages, mostly in boxing or kickboxing competitions. A much younger Jorge, sporting some unique locks, burst onto the scene against a much larger opponent. It was clear to viewers that Masvidal had his opponent beat on the technical end, but one big punch put him down for a moment. Masvidal got up and brought some more heat until the guy said no mas, and the fight was stopped. Fans that watched closely even saw a few kicks from the future top-ranked UFC welterweight. Well, over a decade later, the man who got his start on the mean streets will fight Nate Diaz for the title of baddest mother effer on the planet. But where did he start and how did he get here? Jorge Gamebred Masvidal was born in Miami, Florida, to a Cuban father and Peruvian mother. His father found himself in jail early in Masvidal's childhood on charges of manslaughter and drug trafficking. To carve his own path and keep from, quote, doing things the wrong way, Masvidal turned his time and attention toward the goal of becoming a professional fighter. Coming up in Miami, he learned to box and kickbox. His toughness and aggression brought him to street fight legend Kimbo Slice's self-styled fight circuit, and eventually his viral win over a Slice protege simply known as Ray. As well as his striking, Masvidal began training for MMA and made his pro debut in the summer of 2003. His early career included fights against longtime UFC action lightweight Joe Lauzon and bantamweight top contender Rafael Assunção. Just 4 years after his debut, he scored a head kick KO over old-school MMA legend Yves Edwards, the first man to stop the Thug Jitsu master due to strikes. Jorge bounced around between multiple promotions in his early years, including Bodog fights, a few Strikeforce events, and a few Sengoku events in Japan, before being picked up by Bellator for their first ever event in 2009. He won that first fight with the fledgling promotion, but suffered a wild setback in his second Bellator fight against Tobi Imada just 1 month later. In a fight where he was clearly winning against the 40-fight veteran, Masvidal ended up caught in one of the craziest comeback submissions in all of MMA history, an inverted triangle choke. The submission came off a failed takedown attempt where Gamebred tried to come out the back door between Imada's legs. In the transition, Imada locked in an inverted triangle. Jorge stood up to try and shake the submission off, but instead passed out standing and fell to the floor, ending the fight. It was the last submission loss on Masvidal's record to date. After that, the longtime American top team fighter went through a streak of wild, inconsistent performances, taking on some of the most dangerous and interesting characters in MMA and jumping from promotion to promotion before finding a more permanent home with Strikeforce. He had wins over Satoru Kataoka and KJ Noons, alongside losses to Luis Palomino, Gilbert Melendez, and Paul Daly. Masvidal even fought on one of the last Strikeforce events, Rockhold vs. Kennedy, before the UFC folded the California promotion and took most of its fighter into their own roster. Masvidal made his UFC debut against the Dirty Bird Tim Means, a crafty, wily striker and well-rounded opponent. The two put on a wild fight at UFC on Fox 7, headlined by Benson Henderson vs. Gilbert Melendez, with Masvidal leaning heavily on his grappling to get the win. That trend continued in Gamebred's next bout, where he caught grappling wizard Michael Chiesa in a Darce choke after nearly getting submitted in the fight's opening seconds. Moving forward, Masvidal lost a number of close bouts by decision, 4 of them splits. He has yet to be stopped inside the octagon. He caught a loss to Rustam Khabalov in a fight of the night performance, and although he ran through 3 solid fighters in Pat Healy, Darren Cruikshank, and James Krause, real estate legend Ragin' Ally Quinta put a halt to his momentum in a performance that many fans still argue Masvidal deserved the win. That prompted a return to the welterweight division, where Vitor Belfort protege Cesar Ferreira's ill-advised move down to 170 resulted in a big KO win via standing elbow strike. The victory put Masvidal back on the map and hinted at the kind of highlights that have marked his recent career. Unfortunately, that win was followed by two razor-thin losses to former UFC lightweight champion Benson Henderson and dynamic striker Lorenz Larkin, both via split decision. But after a decision win over Ross Pearson, Masvidal served up two orders for a three-piece and a soda, finishing Jake Ellenberger and Donald Cerrone via TKO. In the very recent past of Jorge's career, a time that has seen the fighter grow out of his now trademarked locks into his current Serpico appearance, Masvidal dropped a tight split decision to Demian Maia and a more decisive loss to Wonderboy Thompson. Rather than setting him back, however, those losses led instead to a fight with British standout Darren Till. Even only an inch taller than Masvidal, Till seemed to tower over him in the cage, but reminiscent of those early bare-knuckle backyard performances, Masvidal survived an early knockdown to blast the gorilla, handing Till his first knockout loss in the process. But that wasn't the only win the 34-year-old would pick up that night. While answering questions from reporters backstage, Masvidal caught sight of fellow welterweight contender Leon Edwards, and the two began trading words. Leon Edwards made some remark about Masvidal, who quickly responded with a, quote, "say it to my face," end quote. He then approached Rocky and, as they got in spitting distance, Masvidal threw a quick multi-punch combo. The two men were immediately separated, but the legend of the three-piece and a soda was born. While talk of a bout with Edwards quickly fell by the wayside, a relative newcomer to the UFC took Masvidal's rising profile as an opportunity to start his own war of words with the longtime action veteran. Ben Askren was fresh off his controversial win over fellow ATT fighter Robbie Lawler, and Masvidal was happy to oblige a wrestling-focused opponent looking to get to the title contention as fast as possible. The two went back and forth over social media for weeks, as Askren is known to do with just about everyone. But when the fight itself started, Gamebred laid against the cage, calm as could be, hands behind his back. And when the referee said fight, he circled to Askren's dominant wrestling side, ran at him and threw a flying knee. Askren couldn't help himself and went into autopilot on the unorthodox start, trying to grab Masvidal out of midair. The move led to Funky Ben getting blasted by the knee full force, ending the fight in a record time of 5 seconds. On the books, it stands as the fastest knockout in UFC history. It has all led to this point and the baddest mother effer in the game belt. That title will be awarded by none other than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson himself on November 2nd to the victor of Jorge Masvidal's bout against Stockton legend Nate Diaz. For years, Masvidal was characterized as the great technical fighter who was always set back by a lack of killer instinct. But every man he faced knew he was gamebred and a serious threat in every circumstance. All that work now comes to fruition for the Florida native. From the streets of Miami to headlining in the UFC, the only question that remains now is Jorge Masvidal the baddest mother effer in the game? Who do you think comes out on top at UFC 244, Masvidal or Diaz? Let us know in the comments section below, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and tap that notification bell for more MMA goodness just like this.